Continuing our look at how the Russo-Ukrainian conflict is impacting the Asia region, Japan joined other nations in sanctions against Moscow and has also banned exports of oil refinery equipment to Russia. There are historical tensions between the two countries, with their dispute over who owns the Kuril Islands just off the coast of Hokkaido. It's one of the world's longest-running territorial disagreements. It's the main reason the countries failed to sign a peace treaty at the end of World War II.
Known as the Southern Kurils in Russia and the Northern Territories in Japan, the archipelago is surrounded by rich fishing grounds and is thought to have offshore reserves of oil and gas. Russia says it's planning a special economic zone on the islands, and it's beefing up its military presence. In December, Russia deployed coastal defense missile systems near the islands as a show of force on Machua, a deserted volcanic island in the middle of the chain. Sovereignty over the Kurils has been disputed for centuries. The islands were occupied by Soviet forces at the end of World War II. Japan disputes Moscow's claim of sovereignty over the 4 southern Kuril islands closest to the main Japanese island of Hokkaido. Last month, the discovery of a US submarine near the Kuril Islands during Russian military exercises added to the hostile atmosphere between Russia and the West. During part of the drills, we have detected near the Kuril Islands a submarine, most likely from the United States, in the Far East Urup Island area. After 3 hours of actions, we have removed it from our territory. This week, Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi described the 4 islands as an integral part of Japan. The saber rattling over the Kuril archipelago goes on.
We have Jeff Kingston, Director of Asian Studies at Temple University, Japan. Jeff, we just had a quick look at Japan and Russia's territorial gripe, but tell us what the other motivations are for Japan taking a strong position on the Ukraine crisis.
Well, I think that Tokyo shares the global outrage at Putin's invasion of Ukraine and the assault on a rules-based international order. So I think it wants to demonstrate solidarity with the G7, strengthen the alliance with the U.S., and, show that it's ready for prime time. The problem is that Japan's track record on sanctions is not that strong. Recall about a year ago, it promised strong sanctions on the military junta that staged coup d'etat in Burma, and nothing much materialized. And back in 2014, it sort of watered down the sanctions against Crimea, probably because it was hoping to improve the context for negotiating those return of those disputed northern territories. So a lot remains to be seen what Tokyo will actually do.
I'm curious, how is Japan likely going to be impacted by this faraway conflict? For example, are you seeing the same spikes in energy prices we're seeing everywhere else?
Sure. Well, the Japanese government is trying to offset that by rolling out subsidies for prices at the pump to try to rein that in. But yes, we're all facing higher energy prices. I think, the big impacts are twofold. One is Japan is very worried about the implications for Taiwan, whether China might see what's perceived to be the weak and irresolute Western response as a chance for it to realize its plan for taking over the island. The other big issue is the Sakhalin LNG projects to the north of Japan. And, Shell and Exxon have indicated that they're going to pull out. But Japanese companies, which hold nearly a quarter share in both of those projects, are very unlikely to pull out. Their view here is that if they divest, that's just going to help China. So they're going to hold on to those investments. And I don't think Japan is going to be really strong on sanctions on Russian energy. Russia only accounts for about 4% of Japan's oil imports and about 9% of LNG. But because of Japan's vulnerability, I think that it's going to be a bit wishy-washy.
Now, we're looking at a world that is dividing between democracies and autocracies, and I want you to talk to us about that. Let me share with you Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's words to the next South Korean president.
Especially now, as the international community faces a new era of major changes, a healthy Japan-South Korea relationship is indispensable in order to realize the international order under rules and for peace, stability, and prosperity in the world and for the region.
Jeff, with this new South Korean leader, are we going to see more cooperation and alignment on security issues between the two countries?
Well, it's going to be very difficult. Seoul and Tokyo never run out of issues to fight over. These frenemies have been battling each other for quite some time. So I'm hopeful, but also skeptical that it's all going to work out as planned.
Jeff Kingston, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, all praises, honor, and glory be to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakak Badash, double honor. As always, them Yah to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are indeed the true teachers of Israel today, and have labored faithfully in His truth. Peace, love, blessings, and salutations to the hopeful elect. Habayah from Adawadah, the house of David, the brothers laboring day in and day out to make their calling of election sure, helping seal the elect of the nation of Israel, for the return of our Lord Hamashiach Yahushai is at hand, and to the Akim and Akwafim, which are the brothers and sisters who listen and believe on the glorious gospel of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Unto you I say Shalom. So Shalom to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel. So we're going to jump right into it. So Brother Sagalah back at it with another lesson, another week, all through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. So we're going to jump into it. And as you see the article here on the screen, it's from cityam.com. And the video that was just played gets into the current situation that's going on as it pertains to Japan and Russia, which, you know, the video covered a lot of what's going on. And these are the islands, you know, here in the Sea of Japan and near the Pacific, where, you know, in the 1800s, since the 1800s and late 1800s, and then again in the 1940s, there's been some redefining of what nations, you know, have actually occupied these lands and who these lands actually belong to. So this article is from Friday, the 1st of April, 2022. So now let's get right into it. Now it says the clash between Japan and Russia looms as Tokyo steps up Kuril Island claims Russia's army is a legal occupier. So the Japanese are saying that the Russians should not, you know, have hold of these islands. And you can see that these islands are off of the mainland of Japan. So why is Russia there? And it spoke about the history going into the Russians during going back to World War II. And we'll read a little bit about that. Now it says the Kuril Islands are currently under control by Russia. So that's the first thing of note. The Kuril Islands are currently under control by Russia after several Japanese politicians recently stated that the disputed Kuril Islands are part of Japan's territory. Tokyo has now moved to officially declare that the entire Kuril Island chain is Japanese sovereign territory. So Japanese are saying all this land, all those islands, which are their lands, belong to them and not to the Russians, right? Which we're going to find out how the Russians came to occupy the certain particular land, certain particular islands, the Kuril Islands. In fact, Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said the islands are illegally occupied by the Russian army. Over the last few decades, the Japanese government has refrained from such bold claims, largely not to damage Japanese-Russian relations. But following the invasion of Ukraine and Japanese sanctions on Russia, diplomatic relations between the two countries have reached a low point, because now, following the lead of Europe and Babylon, Japan put sanctions, because Japan is a key ally of America, right? So they also put sanctions on the Russians. So continuing on, it says, last week the Russian government told Japan it is ending negotiations to sign a formal World War II peace treaty because of Tokyo's efforts to exploit the Ukraine war. It says to claim the Kuril Islands belongs to Japan. So now, Japan, is speaking about how since World War II, going back to the 1940s, how Russia came to, take control of these certain islands, the Kuril Islands, right off the mainland of Japan. So that happened during World War II. That's a thing of note. It says the Russian side, in the current conditions, does not intend to continue talks with Japan on the peace treaty. The Russian foreign minister said in a statement. It says one of the key issues is competing claims over territorial rights. It says of the Kuril Islands, which Tokyo calls its northern territories. Soviet troops seized them from Japan at the end of the war, and Russia still occupies the island group. Now, I got what I wanted from this article, and we'll just pick up from here, through the spirit, that what's going on is that the table is being set, and the pieces to the puzzle are nearly complete. And that puzzle is the gathering of the troops, right? The battle of Armageddon, in the English, and Armageddon, which is in the Hebrew, right? Which is World War III. This is the book of Revelation 16:16. It says that he gathered them, and that he is speaking about the Most High, and he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon, which is once again Armageddon in the Hebrew. When you go into Armageddon, it goes into the Mount of Megiddo, right, or the mounting of the troops. And this is an actual place in northern Israel. So now, let's continue on. I'll read it again, Revelation 16:16. It says, and he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. So this is the gathering of the nations around the world. That is prophecy, that the nations will fight in the last days. So this was prophesied throughout the Holy Scripture. So we're going to get into that, showing that the nations are being gathered. So in one part of the world, in Eastern Europe, you have Slovakia. One part of the world in Eastern Europe, you have what's going on, which is the invasion, of, the lands and territory known as Ukraine by Russia. And you have Russia being sanctioned, and now Russia is on a rampage. These islands, now they're trying to take claim to all the islands that initially belonged to Japan. And so now we're seeing that Russia, the bear, is figuring very prominently in these end time scriptures. As we know in Revelation, the 13th chapter, it speaks about the role that Russia will play at the foot of that statue. So now the Lord is gathering the nations. And so that's, what we see with all these nations. Now also, and we'll get into it here in a second, you also have what's going on with, let's go ahead and pull it out. You also have what's going on here, Slovakia. See if I can find it. Yeah, this is it. So now you also have another situation, which is Taiwan and China. Slovakia for all the pop-ups. So you also have Taiwan and China who also have a beef as well. And that's causing instability, you know, in Tokyo and around that area, right? So now you have instability in different parts of the world, which is coinciding with the Lord bringing the nations together. Zephaniah 3:8, and it reads, "Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, until the day that I rise up to the prey." And who is the prey? It's first and foremost speaking about Esau, Edom, who's just the chief enemy of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, which he's going to be the prey. He's going to be the chase road when you read in Isaiah 13th chapter, right? So the Lord said to wait until he rise up to the prey. He's speaking to the believers. It says, "For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them my indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy." So let's go back to this word, determination. The Lord said his determination is to gather the nations. So who can stop the Most High if he is determined to gather the nations to fight in the battle of Armageddon, right? The mounting of the troops. That word determination goes back to the word H, Hebrew word H, 49:41, and it's the word in the Hebrew mashapat. And the word mashapat means judgment. So when the Lord says my determination, he's saying my judgment. And that word also goes into justice, decision. His justice will be the decision that he's going to make to bring the nations together to fight, so that the children of Israel, you know, will be able to receive salvation, right? Before various parts of the earth are destroyed, but most notably Babylon the Great, which is America. So judgment, the word mashapat, once again, determination, is judgment, justice, a decision, a sentence. The Lord is, through the prophets, giving Esau, reading him his sentencing, which he's going into slavery, and his kingdom is going to fall first, and he's going into slavery, right? So continuing on, it says that the act of deciding a case, and that case is the case of Israel, which is, when you read in the scriptures, the controversy of Zion. So let's get that. What is that case? The case is the case the Lord is making for Israel, right? So let's show that. Let's go to the book. Let's go from there to the book of Isaiah, the 34th chapter. So this is Isaiah 34. This is the case the Lord is making for his people. When you read in the scriptures, right? The Lord said he will plead with them there in the book of Joel, the 3rd chapter. And he's pleading with them by making his case for his people, which is the elect, the children of Israel, but the elect of the nation of Israel, those that have been predestined and preordained to receive salvation in the last days. Now here we go. This is the book of Isaiah 34:8. It says, For it is the day of the Lord Yahweh's vengeance, and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion. The recompenses is plural, because the nations are all going to get recompense, but Esau, Edom will be the head nation that's going to get recompense, because the earth has been given into the hand of the wicked, the children of the wicked. So it says, once again, Isaiah 34:8, it says, "For it is the day of the Lord Yahweh's vengeance, and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion." And when you go into that word controversy, it goes into strife, a dispute, a quarrel, and it also goes into contention. So the dispute, the strife, the quarrel, and contention the Lord has is against the Edomites first and foremost, right? So the controversy of his people, the controversy of Zion, the scriptures say. So now, let's get another precept real quick through the Spirit. Let's go to the book of Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah 25:31, it says, "A noise shall come even to the ends of the earth, for the Lord Yahweh hath a controversy with the nations." So the Lord has a controversy with the nations, which it also says the same thing in Obadiah 1:15, right? That's part of that controversy. Started with Esau, Edom, of course. Now, continuing on, it says, "He will plead with all flesh. He will give them that are wicked to the sword, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua." So he's going to give the wicked to the sword, which is the same thing it says in Isaiah, the 34th chapter, right? The Lord's sword is going to be bathed in heaven, and it will come down upon Idumea, and Isaiah, the 63rd chapter, right? Which are all the prophecies going into that. Now, if you look at this title here from theguardian.com, this article, it says, it feels like the end of the world. Taiwan civilians practice for war as Ukraine revives China fears. So this is the next frontier, which is what's going on. And I'm not going to read the article because this has been in the news. You know, brothers and sisters can actually go check it out for themselves. But this is all the nations being gathered together. That's why so many wars and rumors of wars are going on so many different fronts, because these nations are being gathered together. And we're going to show that through the Spirit here in a second. So let's read Jeremiah 25:31 again. It says, a noise shall come even to the ends of the earth. For the Lord Yahweh hath a controversy with the nations. He will plead with all flesh. He will give them that are wicked to the sword, saith the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua. So that noise, it says a noise is going to come. And once again, in Jeremiah the 51st chapter, it tells you a sound of battle is in the land and of great destruction. That's that noise. So let's get more on that noise, you know, that is being heard from the ends, one end of earth unto the other, right? Which is the Lord gathering together these nations for judgment. That's his mashapat, his judgment, right? So let's show that. So the strong provocation is all prophecy, which is once again, all the pieces of the puzzle is nearly complete. The battle of Armageddon, right? The mounting of the troops. So let's show that here, you know, further in the Spirit. So this is the book of Isaiah 13. This is that noise that we read about in Jeremiah, the 25th chapter. This is that noise. This is Isaiah 13, and I'm going to go right to the point. In verse 4, it says, the noise of a multitude in the mountains. This is the nations gathering together, like as of a great people. A tumultuous noise. So this noise is a terrible noise, which once again is the sound of battle that's in the land, which is found in Jeremiah, the 51st chapter. It says, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua of hosts, mustereth the host of the battle. So the Lord is gathering all these nations together. He's the host, right? He's bringing everybody together to fight, which is his mashapat, his determination, his judgment, right? So that's the noise that's being heard. So now, when you get further into that, you know, what we see going on with Ukraine, and I'll speak on it very briefly, with Ukraine and Russia. Russia has, you know, invaded Ukraine because when you go back to 2014, for instance, in February 2014, Russia invaded and annexed Crimea, which was a peninsula, which was the southern part of Ukraine, right, on the coast. So that happened in 2014. Now, the Ukrainian territory that was taken of Crimea was taken by force, and it fell in just 2 months, which was in March of 2014. So from February to March, which was a little less than 2 months, you know, it fell, and Crimea was taken and annexed, you know, by Russia. When you go into that word annex, because you can look it up, the annexation or Russia annexed Crimea. And that word annex, when you go into it, it goes into the taking of force or seizure or the occupying of lands and territory. It says some synonyms is a conquest, to conquer. It says to invade and to overtake. So when you go and overtake another nation's lands and their territories, which is kind of what's going on in the Sea of Japan. When you look into, you know, that whole situation that I played the video on. So that whole situation is sort of like another example of that in another part of the world. Although Russia was in those lands, and now they are setting up, you know, defense forces and missile systems right there off the coast of Japan, right? So now this land was annexed in 2014. Now, once again, the Ukrainian territory was considered a violation of international law, but nothing was done to Russia, you know, but a few sanctions were slapped on them, which was a slap on the hand, And that emboldened Putin and Russia to now invade Ukraine today. So now we're going to get further into that. So that emboldening, is prophecy, because the Lord said, and I'm just going to quote it, the Lord said that his determination was to gather the nations. And when you read in Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, it tells you that the Medes, which are the Russians, the land of Gog and Magog, the Lord will put the hooks back in the jaws, which meant to bring back the USSR spirit in Russia to come against Babylon, right? Because Russia is one of the most staunch key allies, key foes of Babylon. Russia is one of the key enemies of Babylon the Great in prophecy, right? And China is joined unto Russia, as are many other nations, India as well. So these nations in prophecy are going to come against Babylon and bring them down. So this is the provocation, which lines up with prophecy, which are all the pieces to the puzzle that is nearly complete. So let's show that further. Now, this is in the book of Revelation, the 9th chapter. Let's see if I can get it. Revelation 9. Now, this goes into World War I. When you get down to verse 12, I'm going to read it. It starts to go into World War II, which happened, 21 years after World War I. So in the 1930s, going into the 1940s. And then it prophesies here of the war, the last war that will be to come, which is the one we're reading about, which is the mounting of the troops, the battle of Armageddon. This is Revelation 9 and 12. It says, one war was past, which is World War I, right? It says, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. So we already had the second woe, and the third one is the one to come. It's the last one, right? The battle of Armageddon. Verses 13, Revelation 9 and 13. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before the Most High. Verse 14, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, loose the four angels, which are bound in the great river Euphrates. So these angels, once again, are holding back the destruction, which is similar when you read to Revelation, the 7th chapter, from the first verse on down, where it talks about how there's four angels at the four winds of the earth holding back, the destruction, which is the nuclear destruction. So now, as we continue on, it says at the great river Euphrates, right? One of the reasons why it says the four angels, which is at the great river Euphrates, because the great river Euphrates is one of the main rivers that fed the Garden of Eden, right? There's four rivers. So here on the map, as you can see, we'll zoom into Iraq. So ancient Babylon was in ancient Iraq, which I spent a lot of time here, about 3 years in this region. I know this area, this country very well. So when you see the southern part of Iraq, all the way up past Aleppo, which is a major city in Syria, up into Turkey, as you can see, you have what is known as the Euphrates River, which flows from all the way from Turkey, right, to the east, all the way through almost the central part of Syria into Iraq, and down into the southern part, predominantly of Iraq. Now, the northern part has the Tigris River, which when you read in the book of Jonah, it speaks about, Jonah being in the Nineveh province, which is this city here on the map called Mosul. But maybe that'd be a lesson for another day, going into geography. But that's the northern part, the Tigris River, which is also a famous river. But one of the four rivers that fed the Garden of Eden was the Euphrates River, was one of them. It's mentioned in Genesis. Now, Euphrates River, I've been along this river many times. It's a very narrow river, It's a very, very narrow river. When you go along the riverbanks and go along, the road there, very, very narrow. But now you see it empties out. It goes past the city of Nazareth and Basra, which is all to the south. And then you see Kuwait here on the map. Now, Kuwait here, which, you have a few major port cities here. One is Doha, and then another is Kuwait City. And Kuwait is a very, very small country. It's probably about the size of New Jersey when you look it up, landmass wise. So it's a very, very small state. But you see the Euphrates River, the ancient biblical river, the Lord said he's gathering all the nations in this area to fight. And that river empties out in Kuwait. you know, and into Kuwait there is the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. So that's where that river goes into. So this is the region. I just wanted to show that on the map. This is the actual region, right? So now, as we continue on, we read Revelation 9 and 14 again. It says, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. That's why it's called the great river Euphrates, because this would be the area in the site of that great calamity that's to come, which once again was one of the four rivers that fed the Garden of Eden. So now, in this area, these nations is very important to the river Euphrates is very important because as you see the Persian Gulf, and I'll get another map, here's the Persian Gulf. Persian Gulf, when you look it up here, is right here. You got Kuwait, and then you have the Persian Gulf. Now, you have a lot of nations in this area, which a lot of them are, you know, the Middle East OPEC nations. Now, there's some in other countries, you know, as well as in Africa, you know, and in South America, but South and Central America. But the OPEC nations that are here, they're very key, right? So we see the Euphrates River here, once again, coming through the southern part of Iraq. And these OPEC nations are very important, which is why a lot of these nations are against Babylon, which you have Saudi Arabia, which America does have a military base there, and they have diplomatic relations in the embassy and the consulate and things like that. But a lot of these nations, you know, are really against Babylon. They're not for the forwarding, you know, of the American agenda. You also have Kuwait, which is right now an ally, you know, of Babylon as well, you know, because America went into, in 1990, in the early 90s, they went into Kuwait to stop Saddam from annexing Kuwait. So there's built military bases all throughout Kuwait as well. But then you have Iraq, who's not an ally at all with America. Iran, who's not, you know, who's a staunch foe. Now, Qatar is a neutral nation. I've been there as well, and they're not with, you know, America. They're somewhat neutral. They're not against, they're neutral. They're not for or against, right? But America also has military installations in that area as well. And then you got the United Arab Emirates, which is, you know, completely, it's like America, pretty much. Now, in this region, you see these different nations, and you have this small area here, which is called the Strait of Hormuz, which is a very key area. Now, I'm bringing all this up to show, you know, through geography, the area where the Battle of Armageddon, you know, is going to be, right? It's in this region. Now, this region extends further west as well. But this is the general region. It extends west because Israel is not too far from this area as well, right? So another thing of note here is that that about 40% of the world's petroleum and oil that's produced in the world market daily comes from this region right here, which is the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, which is right over here. This little narrow alleyway here. Now, let's go back. Matter of fact, yeah, let's go back. I'll go back to the article. So, it says it feels like the end of the world. Taiwan civilians practice for war as Ukraine revives China fears. So what's going on in Ukraine is pushing forth that energy, you know, which is the Medes. It's stirring up everything, which is really the spirit of the Lord that's stirring everything up on earth. So I just wanted to go into that, Lord willing. It was edifying for those that view the lesson, to the Akim and Akwaf, you know, who listen and believe on the glorious gospel. May you continue to listen and believe for you brothers. As I pushing the word, continue to push the word. I want to give all praises, honor and glory, infinite honor and glory to Yahweh, by Hashem Yahushai, by Hashem Rakak Wadash. Double honor as always from Yah to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are the true teachers of Israel today. Peace, love, blessings, and salutations to the hopeful elect. Habayah from Madawadah, the house of David, the brothers laboring day in and day out to make their calling of election sure. Help us seal the elect of the nation of Israel For the return of our Lord, Hamashiach Yahushai, is at hand, and to the Akim and Akwafim, the brothers and sisters who listen and believe on this gospel. Unto you I say shalom. So shalom to the hopeful elect.